Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Swaim Strategies, a consulting firm dedicated to nonprofit fundraising events. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Hello, and welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. In a past episode, we were diving into the importance of inviting people in. Live on the Elevate stage, Clay Buck said, stop asking and start inviting. And we've been talking about that in a number of episodes recently about all the different ways we can invite our donors back in. We've been talking about gatherings of all sizes. And today we are talking about cultivation events. Our guest today is Vice President and Principal of Wingo, a fundraising and donor communication firm for social, cultural, and environmental change. Amina Abdul-Majeed is a seasoned nonprofit fundraising specialist with 20 years of fundraising and development leadership experience in the social justice and education sectors. She demonstrates a natural aptitude for expanding donor channels as well as creating effective fundraising strategies to engage individuals, institutional, and corporate donors. Prior to joining the Wingo team, she was the development director at Just Leadership USA, where she managed and grew a national portfolio of individuals and institutional funders. Her career in nonprofit fundraising started in the education sector, where she led the fundraising department for private Catholic and charter schools. She was also a Net Impact Service Corps volunteer consultant and program committee member, where she helped New York City nonprofits develop partnership and community outreach strategies. She currently serves as the board secretary for Bronx Council on the Arts, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing cultural equity in the Bronx. A fundraising expert through and through, Amina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, we are so glad you're here. And when we first connected, we talked about the importance of all sorts of gatherings and cultivation events, and we want to dive into that. But first, big picture, you're a consultant, you're in New York City, you're working with dozens, sometimes even hundreds of organizations at a time. I'm curious, in this 2026 landscape we're living in, what are you seeing in the way of trends in the sector right now? What sort of is the hot goss happening from New York?
Well, I think, the feeling that development directors and executive directors, like what keeps them up at night and how are we going to make our budget? Where's the money going to come from? I think that still remains. But I think 2025 was really interesting with the new administration.
Mm-hmm.
I think in many ways, some nonprofits got caught off guard, especially with the loss of a lot of government funding and even individuals sort of pulling back, corporations getting scared when you mentioned DEI.
Right.
So I think a lot of nonprofits were like, wait a minute, what's going on? How do we navigate this? Because it's sort of like, especially in the work that I do, because I work with nonprofits that are focused on social justice, the advocacy space. So reproductive justice, immigration justice and immigration rights, racial justice. So, those are all sort of hot topics. They're still hot topics. So I think there was a little retraction in some ways from funders and nonprofits not really knowing how to respond. But at the same time, there was also a lot of rage giving because people were really upset and pissed about what was happening. And so the nonprofits that had the infrastructure and space to get the word out on what's happening on the ground, how it's impacting the mission, actually did experience, increased giving because they're like letting people like we're in a crisis and we need support. But at the same time, there were nonprofits that did struggle a little bit with the messaging just because they just didn't have the right infrastructure and space to be able to pivot and sort of switch narrative quickly. I think in 2026, I think there's a little bit of I think things are looking up. Is how I would say. I think people have gotten their footing. They are getting better at the messaging. I even think some individuals, foundations are starting to sort of reevaluate and refine their strategy and being a little bit more open and transparent about what their processes are, what their priorities are. So there's more conversation happening and not a lot of the what's happening kind of stuff that was
panic.
happening in 2025.
Yeah.
So that's really good. And there's like more momentum. People are being bolder with their missions, especially in the social justice. So that's always really good. People are not backing down. And there's some donors that are also not backing down and putting, their money where their heart is, and being public about that. So I think that's the trend in terms of events and being in person. People are still craving that.
Yeah.
That's still a thing. We're in the, event season for our gala team. It's just the start of it. So those things haven't changed. We haven't seen a lot of change in that area so much. So, and I think with the midterms coming up, there's more momentum. And I think there'll be more rage giving and more, more of that this year.
Yeah, I never thought we'd be at a point where rage giving, those words were music to my ears, but here we are.
Here we are. Well, we are in a similar space. We work with a lot of social justice organizations. And one of the things in the looking up category that we've seen is we're also seeing that folks are not just improving their messaging and doubling down on their mission and sort of their resolve, but they're also opening new sort of ways of doing things. We're seeing a lot more collaboration in the nonprofit sector. We're seeing a lot of organizations that are talking about how to strengthen across multiple organizations serving a similar mission. And so there's some hope in that for me. I'm kind of excited and hopeful to see what, 5 years from now, we'll be looking back and seeing what were those moments where big change occurred. But it does feel like it's a little bit better on the fundraising front and a little bit clearer messaging and a little bit less fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Amina, you work on smaller cultivation events, and I don't want to take for granted that people understand all of the differentiation between the event models. So can you talk a little bit about how you define a cultivation event and how that differs from something like a major donor event, which we spend a lot of time also talking about?
So at Wingo, we define a cultivation event as a small, intimate gathering of your current and prospective donors, right? So the purpose of a cultivation event is really relationship building and not so much revenue generation. So that I think that's the bigger distinction between a gala. Galas are really celebratory, high visibility, large scale. There's a fundraising goal, a clear ask, and there's a lot of investment, right, put into developing and producing a gala. So there is, the pressure of this return on that investment of raising a certain amount. And a lot of organizations rely on galas as part of their income for the year. Cultivation events are not focused on the revenue. We're really focused on the relationship building. And so when I say small, I mean, small can look different depending on the format and the organization. But I would say a small event, maybe 40 to 50 people. And sometimes it could be in someone's home. So that may be some people have bigger homes and it can accommodate more people. Or sometimes it could be in a sort of an art gallery in New York City. That's a really popular place, or a museum or garden, sometimes even a bar. The purpose of the cultivation is really to invite people into the mission, to get more engaged with the leadership, with what's happening, with programs. And really, it's about the stewardship afterwards. So that's, I think, the biggest distinction, right? Is really relationship and not so much the revenue generation at that evening.
Great. I think it's super important for folks to sort of understand the mechanisms we're talking about when we're talking about the cultivation.
Yeah,
events.
and I should also add that typically we like to do a 2-hour format. So galas tend to be a little bit longer. So it's really a cocktail, so not a seated event typically. And so there's a small speaking program because everyone's standing. We don't want to drag out a speaking program. So really it's about 20 minutes is what we usually advise.
Great.
So I think with all of the different event models we have, peer-to-peer models, signature event models, sort of the Benavon model, which is the new acquisition model, each of those have a very specific purpose they serve. And I think sometimes we merge ideas.
These are all great. Let's do them all at the same time.
Or we pick up on like, this is working for that organization, so we're going to apply it, but we don't necessarily understand the strategy. So I'm a big fan of understanding kind of the strategy behind it and understanding when you make the choice, when you're working with organizations and you have a recommendation of you need a cultivation event, what typically are you seeing is the like reason or the sort of model you're tapping into of the nonprofit's need and the recommendation for this model of a gathering?
So, cultivation events are not the strategy. They're just a piece of a larger major donor giving strategy. And so typically when we're working with our clients, that is what we're working with them on how to build their major individual donor giving program, how to build that infrastructure. And typically our clients are small to mid-size, right? So they don't have the capacity or the staff to, have, 10 donor visits a day, getting in front of their donors. So there's only so much amount of time. So we always say that, having a cultivation event at least once a year is an opportunity to be in front of your donors. That's just part of like cultivating and being in front of them. So, we always like to use the example of churches. Every Sunday, the church sees their donors. They're in front of their donors and they spread religion and they ask their donors for money. And so this is just sort of part of the culture. Like every week they get to see their donors. So in nonprofits, we don't usually have that luxury. We don't get to see our donors every week. So we need an opportunity to do that. So the gala is one way. That's sort of like we said, the larger celebration. But for some clients that don't do annual galas, never done a gala, the cultivation event is a smaller option and a good introductory way to start building your donor base, building that major donor cultivation. And then, several years down the line, that could grow into a gala.
Yeah. I think sometimes we are still mildly surprised, without perhaps the delighted part, about how nonprofits evaluate their individual giving programs. Sometimes they think they have an amazing one when they're like not. And and vice versa. Like sometimes they're just like, oh, we don't have anything. And you pull up the data and they're like, oh, I guess I didn't realize that was happening.
Right.
And so I think people understanding how to map an event to their actual donor program and what that looks like. How do you help clients find clarity on their individual giving program and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a lot of just not diving into the details and into the data. And so that's what we help our clients do. And so what we look at is we look at trends, their individual giving trends over, we may say 3 to 5 years to see who's giving, because we want to see, are you retaining donors, or are you just getting is there a campaign that happens that like a one-off campaign, you get an influx and then all those donors disappear? Are you growing your donor base? Are you adding new donors year over year? Because that's sort of a signal that, okay, so you have a pretty good individual giving program. You're retaining donors. You're bringing new people in. So there is some mechanism that you have in place that's allowing for you to sort of build this program. And, a lot of times that's not always the case. We also want to look at the board and the level of engagement of the board, because a lot of times there's always tension with staff and fundraising staff and board. We always hear, oh, the board's not doing anything. They don't listen. They never ask for ask their friends, for money and all these things. And there are many quick fixes and, some things that we help our client do to help bring the board along. But I think that's a really important way to assess an individual giving program, because you do want to make sure that you have your board engaged, because fundraising is a team sport. It's not a solo sport. We need everybody on board. I see this a lot with clients as a director of development. I experience this, and I know that it's frustration with the board. I'm also a board member, so I understand the frustration. So I get see it on all different levels, but it is very critical to have that buy-in from your board before you start thinking about whether you're ready for a cultivation event. So just going back to like, how do you assess? You want to make sure you know who your donors are. You have some sense of why they've given, what are their interests, and what are some next steps, cultivation next steps that you can engage with them. Some people are, they've been giving, maybe they need a more personal one-on-one meeting. But a lot of times, a lot of people, we just need to, meet with them at a cultivation event and sort of network with them, schmooze, give them some, bring them into the story, into the mission, and really engage them that way.
And often I would imagine too, for some of those folks, that it could go either way. Bringing them into an event does this really interesting thing where they're actually in community with folks in their position.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be a very different way to have those quote unquote conversations with donors and I love how you say that, bringing them into the story.
Yeah, I think what's nice about cultivation events is that it's not a transactional, it's not meant to be a
Right.
transactional activity, right? If done well, your donors, prospective donors, they feel like they're part of something special, and there's a clear way that they can make an impact
Yep.
in society, right? Because a lot of people that are giving, they want to leave the world better than it is. And you want to be able to contribute something, either as a legacy or you just a regular donor. So you want to feel like your dollars matter, and so bringing them in to the story, to the mission. And that looks like, either the executive director sort of kind of talking about, the overall mission, bringing in programmatic people, or sometimes, if appropriate, bringing constituents and the people that the organization serves to kind of talk about the work and the importance of the work. And then having, your hosts, or a host committee member, to talk about why they give, why this organization is important to them, and why, like they want other people to join. And so, that's always gives people a really good feeling, and also creating space in the program for donors to ask questions. The Q&A portion is always really nice because you don't get that in a gala, in a
Right.
large event setting, to really ask leadership some, probing questions and really dive more deeply into the programs.
Yeah.
Well, you just touched on a whole bunch of things I want to ask more about. So, a lot of elements that you're incorporating. First, you talked about board engagement and the cultivation event being a really amazing opportunity for board engagement. I've been on a board where that invite into someone else's cultivation event helped to onboard me, right? It was like a part of my onboarding process. But do you frequently ask board members to host these events, like in their homes?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, when we're starting to plan a cultivation event, is to identify who the host or the host committee should be. Many times the board is the host committee. So, and the role of the host committee, sometimes people get really stressed about host committee members. The role of the host committee is to lend their name
Yeah.
to the invitation
Great
and
influence.
to send the invitation to their friends and bring
Uh-huh.
people. That is all we ask of the host committee. A lot of the work is put on, so like us as the consultants, or, if it's an internal event, on the staff, development
Yep.
staff, to really provide all the tools and resources that the host committee members need so that they can do that role very easily. So, we'll design the invitation, we design the outreach text, the invitation, all of those things, and we give it to the host committee. Many times we'll tell the host committee, give us your names and emails. We will do all the outreach on your behalf. Sometimes the host community, they don't want to do that. And
Right.
so we give them everything. It's like, all right, copy, paste this, and you send it out. That's really their role, is invite people. And then also we want them to be at the event, of course. So that's really what we want them to do. And so the board members, as I said, are typically on the host committee. Will throw their names on there just as a, to kind of beef it up. A lot of time hosts, they don't want to feel like they're the only ones doing it,
Right.
even though it might be hosted in someone's home. That person is the host, but the host committee can include a lot of other people. And it could include donors as well. And it could include just friends of the organization. Maybe they don't have high capacity, but they have connections and they know a lot of people. They're very social people and like to, they're very social. They like to go to parties. They like host parties. Right. So there's not a dollar, they have to raise a certain amount of money. It's not that type of commitment.
Yeah.
And so board engagement, host committee, you mentioned program, short program. Who typically is speaking in that program and what are the elements of that program?
Yeah, so I would say usually a board member or one of the hosts or a host committee member would open the program,
Okay.
the short remarks, and like 20-minute program is really short. So it's very tight. They just welcome guests. They may say, how they got involved with the organization, what's their relationship, why organization is so important to them. And then they pass it on typically to the executive director, the head of the organization, who sort of provides sort of the big picture of the organization. What's the sort of the history, the mission, the long-term vision, and add a little bit more, just provide more meat into like what the organization is about. And then we typically would say maybe a programmatic person will, have a speak about something. Sometimes we'll have a programmatic person talk about a specific program that maybe is really impactful, or maybe that's the program that needs the most support from donors. So we want to highlight that program. And the program director does a little overview of the program and the impact. And we want to make it as human and honest and authentic as possible. Sometimes, when appropriate, as I said, the program director may invite a constituent, a program recipient to participate and, tell a piece of that story. And those are always really powerful to hear the impact or hear their story in their own words. And so that's usually the meat of the program. And we spend more time there so that people hear what the actual impact looks like and what it feels like. And then after that, we typically will say either another host committee member or a board member, or whoever feels comfortable giving a soft ask, they sort of close out, right? So they sort of take, what they heard and sort of talk about the importance of the mission of the organization and typically you're closing like this work does not happen without the support of our donors. And so the ask can be something like, we hope you will consider continuing to support this important work. Or, if you have questions, we invite you to, ask us questions. We look forward to continuing, continuing these conversations in the future, inviting you to future events, and also highlighting that there are materials that we want them to take home with them. So usually we have case materials folders that includes, information, the information packet, an overview, an issue fact sheet, for example. And also we include a pledge form, right? So it's not like a hard direct ask, but when they go home and they look through, they'll see, okay, here are all the ways that you can give and support our work and mail that in or online or whatnot. So that's typically, the sort of the agenda for the evening.
So short and sweet, soft ask.
We love short and sweet.
A host or a host committee. Where do you see people overcomplicate, or where do you see people find challenges in this model?
I think the hardest part is it's the pre-planning, So if you don't have sort of a structure, we usually have a 3-month timeline structure that we do for cultivation events. We'll produce it soup to nuts. The challenging part is always getting host committee members, because it sometimes can be challenging to get names or get the invitations out. So that's where I see like there's always some delay. Like we need to get the invitation out. We need, like we have the organization will have their list of their current donors or any prospective donors on their end, but we really rely on host committee members to bring in, right, to bring in
Yep.
those new people that we want to invite. So sometimes that takes a while. That could be frustrating. But again, it's all about the follow up and being persistent and providing them with the tools. So sometimes on a weekly basis, we will email host committee members like, hey, did you do this? Hey, would you like to share the names with us? Here's your template. Here,
Yeah.
and we just do it.
Yeah.
We're like the friendly nudgers on a weekly basis.
Wingo, the friendly
And
nudgers.
yeah. And I think that's hard for small organizations that, to have that sort of time and capacity to
Yeah.
constantly keep doing that. And, sometimes it feels frustrating and it's sometimes defeating sometimes is that you're a junior person in development because, host committee or board members, there's a power dynamic. So they feel like,
Yep.
well, they can't like make them do anything. You really have to, they sometimes feel like it's pulling teeth. And
Yeah.
sometimes it is, but you just got to stick with it and you have to be persistent.
What do you think for folks who are sitting there going, interesting, I've not considered this. What do you think the best opportunity of a cultivation event is?
Yeah. So I think, the best opportunity again is bringing people in to the mission. Making them feel connected. It's also a really great opportunity to bring new
Yep.
donors and to build a pipeline, right? So again, if you do a cultivation event right, after a cultivation event, you're doing follow-up 24, 48 hours later, you're sending a thank you, you're sharing photographs if you have a photographer at the event. And you're reminding people that they can always support the organization, make a donation, but also you want to be able to debrief and identify who were sort of the top prospects that were in the room that night that you need to follow up with and have that one-on-one
Yep.
meeting. Right. So this is all part of that building the major donor giving program and the pipeline. And this just becomes part of fundraising at the organization. So
Yes.
every year, or maybe twice a year, sometimes the organization has capacity to do 2 cultivation events a year, one in the spring, one in the fall, or if it's just one, but it becomes a rinse and repeat. And once it just becomes part of the program, it becomes a lot easier to manage because you have the templates in place. You have a better understanding who your donors are. Your lists are better segmented. So the opportunity is you're building a pipeline, you're growing individual donors, and you have an infrastructure that works.
Yep.
And that is, that's always the goal of fundraisers, right? You want to be able to sort of build a program that, continues to support the organization. So that's the biggest opportunity, bringing people in, bringing people together to learn about the organization and to love the organization and to stay with the organization.
Well, I love your church analogy because I think that we frequently are talking about events are a way to create shared language, shared belief systems around your mission. And so it's a great analogy about if we're not bringing people into the space for that storytelling, we're missing that opportunity. And then the cultivation that comes after, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to dive into that cultivation a little bit. So we'll be right back.
Great.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the fundraising elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristen for your programming and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at swaimstrategies.com. You can also find the link in our show notes.
Welcome back. We are here talking about cultivation events, and how they can be a great strategy for organizations to build toward major donor engagement. Let's talk about the ask at this event. Amina, you talked about a soft ask earlier. What does this usually look like at the event? Because I think that designation and actually what that language and what it looks like is important for folks to understand.
Yes. So they're at a cultivation event, it's not a paddle raise, it's not a live ass sort of format. It's really about, the cultivation event opens the door to the ask, right? So we're thinking about in the future, it's going to open the door to the ask. We're not forcing it. But of course, we're fundraisers, so we're always thinking about raising money. So you have a group of donors and prospective donors. It's foolish to not suggest an
That's
ask
right.
and give people ways to give if they're
Yeah.
so moved, because people may be moved in the moment. So it's really about like during the program when you talk about the impact, and then whoever is making the ask, and you really want to make sure that you pick the right person. Because it may not be the executive director, because sometimes the executive, they're not comfortable doing that. And maybe it's not it could just be someone that can speak very passionately about the organization and has no problem telling their friends, the audience, like, I really hope you've learned something today, and I really hope you consider supporting this work through giving online, programmatic sponsorship opportunities, making a planned gift, and again, you can, sometimes the person will, allude to the fact that when you leave, you will be receiving a packet, and in the packet, there are different ways to give. So we really hope that you would consider that. And again, sometimes, when we're preparing it, sometimes we'll have a board member or maybe a host committee member or donor that's willing to give a match. That doesn't always happen for cultivation events. But if you have someone that's like, I'm willing to match, say $5,000 in the room, that's, again, it's going to be maybe a bigger ask, but we don't want to lose that opportunity. So we do want to, sort of make that pitch in the room as well. But again, we really just want them to, learn more, stay connected, and that you want to stay in touch with them. Because the other thing that sometimes happens, and this all really depends on who's in the room. So that's why it's important that you know the audience, you know who's in the room. Because sometimes you have people in the room that could be very major donor prospects. And so you don't want to make an ask, like, give what you can today. Although, we do want to say, like, make something like a gift that's meaningful to you. But sometimes people say, like, oh, we want $1,000. Everyone in the room give $1,000. And you do that. And sometimes you have someone in the room that can give a 5 or 6 figure gift. So you don't want to lose them that way. So that's why it's really, we want people to support the work, invite them to give, offer them ways to give. There's the follow-up, but really it's that targeted follow-up, those targeted asks after the after the event that I think really make a difference.
So how often do you see folks giving at the event, and how much of, like, generally, how much does this contribute to the bottom line or a budget for an organization? Are they raising money primarily after as a part of their major donor funnel, or are you attributing this as an actual budget line item in their revenue?
No, so cultivation events, we don't put it in the budget line as like a fundraising event. Usually this will be part of individual giving. So if we have an individual giving projection, right, we're assuming that some of that is going to come from cultivation events, and some of it from, maybe your mailed appeals. Some of that is going to come from your those one-on-one meetings. As well. So I think, so I wouldn't put cultivation events at its own revenue line.
Great.
The same way I would put like a gala.
Right. So I want to pull some of the threads, because we've dropped some of the breadcrumbs for people about this being the sort of kick into cultivation. Right? Like, this is where you start to map cultivation post-event and what that looks like. Can you give us an example, sort of stem to stern, of what that could look like for folks so they can get their imagination around the work that's at hand post-event?
what the post-event process.
Yeah.
So a lot of the post-event work you want to do before the event.
Yes.
Meaning, we always recommend having all your emails drafted and ready to go. So that after the event, you're not thinking, okay, so what are we going to say? What's the messaging?
Right.
So, really after the event, you want to be able to just kind of customize that language so that it reflects what happened and maybe pull some quotes, special quotes from the event. So that's the 24 to 48-hour window. You want to send that, even handwritten thank you notes. If it's not a huge guest list, maybe it's a really small, like handwritten thank you notes for
Yep.
coming. Also, I think it's really important to debrief with the host committee members, with your fundraising
Yep.
staff, to talk about who was in the room,
And what
right?
did
Who
you
was
learn?
there? Who was there and maybe who wasn't there,
Right.
right? And really start building out that tracker of what are the next steps for each of these people. So as I said earlier, there's probably going to be people at the event that are maybe some really big prospects that you really want to sit down with, right? And so you really want to be clear about who, identifying in your tracker, who are those people and who's going to do the outreach. Who's going to send that meeting request? Is it the executive director, or maybe it's the host committee member that initiates that initial conversation because that's their friend or their connection? And then you want to, obviously schedule that and have, prep those meetings as well. And then you also want to make sure that everyone becomes part of your donor communications, whether that's, getting them into your e-news so that they're receiving, regular communications from the organization, that they're, part of, if you have a welcome series and they've never been part, putting that
Yep.
into the process is really important. And then, making sure that, again, as I said, some people have a targeted ask and some people may need, maybe it's a solicitation letter, right? So identifying what are the different ways that we need to cultivate, steward, or solicit, right?
Yep.
Because some people are ready to solicit, some people need more cultivation, or, some are just your recent donors. And so you want to find ways to steward them. What are the other opportunities or the, programmatic things that you can invite them to? And also to be clear about what are the program sponsorship opportunities as well. So that's, I think, a really cool case material and document that we like to include in these donor packets, just so people can kind of get a sense of what our programs cost and where they see themselves. All right, to let them sort of self-select what's important to them. So having all of those things in place and having a clear tracker with clear next steps, and who's going to be doing the outreach, setting up the meeting, who's going to be at the meeting or who's writing the letter, who said, all those things need to be, that's part of that post-event follow-up process.
Yeah. And I think it's important for fundraisers to really keep in mind that you're losing temperature the longer you wait, right?
Right.
That this cultivation event means we're all simmering in a pot together. We're all, come on in, the water's fine, right? Remembering the information that you've laid the groundwork for. These are not cold calls after the fact. These are not you calling up lapsed donors 2 years post trying to figure out why they don't give anymore. These are people who signaled you.
Right.
These are people who either, it may be, Sam, you invited me and I came because I really appreciate you. But also, I learned something about an organization you care about, right? And so there is warmth there for you to be able to move forward. And I think sometimes in that post event, oh my God, it's over, thank God, we let the lapse happen.
Right. Absolutely.
And being able to really just carry some of that momentum into those conversations can really serve you and the cultivation of this relationship.
Yeah, because a lot of times people feel because they produce a beautiful program, people cried, people like just really felt so good, and they assume, well, they'll just give.
Right.
And sometimes that is, there are people that will
Sure.
do that, but a lot of times they won't, because you just need to ask them.
Yep.
I've been a guest at cultivation events that I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love this. I would love to like be involved with the organization. And I never heard from them.
Ugh.
You know, like I literally never, like there was like nothing. And I was like, oh my goodness,
At least put me in
this
your
is not
email
good.
cycle.
At least put me on an email or something, you know, like
Right.
there was nothing. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Part of me was like, oh, should I call them and tell, you know, as the consultant, I'm like,
Right.
you know, you should
Right.
do that.
You're missing the
But
real
yeah,
work.
but yeah, I mean, it's a missed
Yeah.
opportunity, right? If you think like just because you're, you know, like we're all like all these they're all doing amazing
Yep.
work and having
Yep.
real impact. You know, that's not a question. It's just really, you know, getting in front of the right people at the right time and making a clear ask. If it's not a donation, right? It's like, I want you to stay connected. I want you to be
Yep.
part of this story with us.
Yep.
And that me, you know, like afterwards, it's like, okay, you're part of our community. Like you're a friend, you're going to receive information. I'd love to sit down with you and have a chat. Let's get coffee, you know, like you need to really stay engaged with your audience.
We worked with an organization that utilized this model, and one of their sort of key elements was that their board each hosted a dinner, and it was a small group. So each board member committed to a dinner for 10, and the development director and the executive director were in attendance at each dinner. So it was easy to find a place or a location for a small group. It was lower cost to host a group of that size. The board member took on the responsibility of the invitations. And what we found afterwards was it was easier to follow up with a group of that size in meaningful ways, because the executive director and the development director could have 4 of these a year and have very meaningful follow-up with each of the 10 guests, then have one 40-person event where they felt rushed and didn't feel like they were getting meaningful follow-up. And interestingly enough, the board members all got very invested in that follow-up as well. So they'd be like, hey, I invited Sarah to attend. Sarah expressed interest. Let's have a conversation. I'll go to lunch with you, because the board members knew those folks. And so it was a really interesting way to make sure that the stewardship not just happened, but also happened in a group. It wasn't just happening alone, which I think, you know, so often that's one of the conundrums we run into, especially smaller organizations, is time and capacity and how to prioritize. And this was an opportunity to actually like leverage that relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful example and a beautiful model, because that just shows, right? Like it's the fundraising as a sport. Like you have a
Yes.
board members that are engaged and understand the assignment, right? And so, you know, that's a lot easier to do. You do 4 of those a year is easy to do if you have your board members that have already committed to this and
Yeah.
said, I will do this and I'm inviting 10 people. Beautiful. But I mean, imagine like you want to do that, but you don't have the board, right? So that means you're spending so much time trying to figure out who's going to do this, who's going to do this.
Yep.
Will you, you know, like, and that's what get people caught up. It's like you don't have the clear expectation, the clear roles, or like the right people doing the right things. And so sometimes like that would be a perfect model. I think, you know, all organizations would love that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, my board members will bring 10 people
Yes.
and like help me solicit and do that. Perfect. But if you don't have it, right? Like, okay, let's at least get one night where all of our board members can try to bring
2
5
people.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 people. 2 people.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
You know, so you really have, it really depends. Like, that's why you have to really assess, where is my individual giving program right now?
Yeah.
Are we, you know, just like really going full speed ahead because we have all the people, everyone's engaged, everyone knows what to do and really excited? Or are we sort of like, all right, we don't have all the pieces, but we have donors that we know we need to be in front of. And so we need a way to do that efficiently. And that allows us and gives us the capacity to sustain it
Yep.
over time.
Yep.
So the one cultivation event a year model is one way to do that.
Yeah.
So we all sit here as consultants. that's not something that's available to all of our frontline fundraisers, right? So if I'm a frontline fundraiser and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, light bulb just went off for me. I'm like, this, I see this.
I
can
need to do
see
this.
this having a place in my organization, in the work that I need to be doing. How would you advise me about where the heck to start? Like, where do I start with this?
Yes. So I would say look at your board, look at, immediate sort of donors. Who are some people, like core people that you could count on to be a host committee? Like who can you count on that can at least bring 5 to 10 people that you can trust, right? And then also look at your donor base. Look at, who's been giving in the past 3 to 5 years. Try to look at what the trends are. Do you have donors? What's your retention? Are you retaining donors year over year? And also look at what is this is always like a tough question. People's like, well, what level is a major donor?
Yeah.
Right? Is it, like it really depends on your
Yep.
organization. But it could be 5,000 and above. It could be like if there's 100 people or like 50 people at 5,000 and above, maybe set that as your sort of level of major donor giving. Sometimes it could be as low as 500, but
Yep.
really get a sense of what is a major gift for your organization,
Yep.
and kind of get a sense of how many people do you have in your database, in your world, that you want to sit down with and that you want to learn more about. We use wealth screening tools to kind of get fast and dirty information about our donors and what their capacity is. It's not a perfect tool, but it's just something we use to sort of get started. So if you have access to that, definitely look at that and, rate and screen your donor base. A lot of the CRMs nowadays, they have these AI tools that kind of like is now built in to do that. So, take a look at that to see, who are some people that maybe have more capacity than you thought. Because you definitely want to put those as part of the people that you want in this cultivation event, but also maybe people that you need to sit down with and think about that as well. Maybe who are the top 25 people for the year. Try to get, two people a month that you can try to get meetings with, in addition to, the rest of your donors that you want to sort of cultivate at these cultivation events. So, looking who you have as host committees, as your champions that you
Yep.
can sort of lean on, and then looking at your donor base. Who's there? What do you know about your donors?
Yep.
How much information do you have? What kind of segments do you have? Sometimes if it's your first one, invite a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think, like it's fine, because you've never done it before and maybe you don't know. And so you kind of want to see like, okay, who comes?
Yep.
Because as you said out earlier, like whoever comes is self-selecting and
Yep.
they're signaling to you that they want to be more engaged. So, that's a way to start, have a low cost, find a venue that maybe will, do it really low cost or do it for
Yep.
free or have someone's home. Um, you know, what do you call it? Stationary hors d'oeuvres, wine and beer. Is typically what, we try not to go too crazy with the
Right.
alcohol because that
Right.
adds to cost, but, to try different ways to make it simple.
Okay, so here's what I'm
Yep.
hearing. You start first by understanding your database. You identify your hosts. Once you know who is inviting folks, you identify within your donor database what a major donor is, the number of major donors you have, and who you want more time with, who your hosts are inviting and who you're reaching out to. Make a date and a venue plan. Put together some light food and light alcohol offerings like wine or beer. Design your program, your invites, and then have a stewardship plan for afterwards. Is that right? Did we cover the...
Yeah. We covered everything. Have your program, who your speakers are going to be. Just in terms of timeline, get your invitation out 4 to 6 weeks
Okay.
Yep.
in advance.
And then
We have a lot of clients that want to wait 2 weeks. We're like,
No.
no, people
no,
have
you
busy
gotta get
lives.
it
You cannot
out.
get on
Like,
people's calendar that way.
yeah.
And then when the guests are leaving, you also mentioned some sort of information materials that you're handing to guests as they go. So,
Yes, a donor packet.
Yep.
So that's, like a nicely designed packet folder that includes at a minimum a one-page overview of your organization, an issue fact sheet, which is really like to frame the need and the issue of your organization. Sometimes it's issue specific, like the issue that your particular constituents are dealing with, or that your organization is dealing with, or it could be more broad, like
Yep.
what are the issues of the world. We talk about poverty or access to abortion and things like that, just more broadly, that type of issue fact sheet. Testimonials. Sometimes we like to include testimonials just because testimonials sort of adds credibility to the organization. It could be testimonials from constituents, from donors or institutional funders, or even partner organizations to kind of talk about the impact of your organization. So that sort of document. And then the sponsorship opportunities that I had mentioned earlier, which is sort of a menu of options for donors that may be interested in restricting their gift and what that might look like. What are the programmatic areas that your organization has that you're willing to allow an organization to a donor to restrict their gift for? So that's a really cool tool because it, like I said, it just kind of gives people an understanding of what your programs cost, so they can
Yep.
kind of see. So if they're interested in a giving at a different, like they're like, oh, well, I think I want to give $10,000. What does that do? And so
Yep.
they can kind of gauge, okay, what kind of impact they might have. And then of course the pledge form, ways to give. Like you want to make sure that the pledge form has the different ways online. They can fill out the form, where they send the form back to. And then also we like to include a planned gift intent form. That's sort of a passive way of, sort of
hinting,
signaling to
Planting a
people like
seed.
that planting a seed, right? Like it's not an ask. We don't
Right.
talk about planned gift intent form. It's just there to just let them know that we have the infrastructure. We welcome these type of gifts, and that we welcome a conversation if they're interested. So, like separate from a planned giving campaign, but it's just so there. We always recommend that you have that form on your website as well.
Great.
well, we started this conversation today. You said folks truly are interested in making an impact. And I think that this as a tool, the cultivation event as a tool, is a path to be able to invite people in.
Yep.
We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to step in the fundraising elevator. We'll be right back.
Change. It doesn't happen on its own. It happens on purpose. Thanks to nonprofits that believe a brighter future is not just possible, but needed and deserved. And that connect people to causes and turn moments of generosity into movements. That's why Bloomerang is built for purpose. To raise the bar on what's possible and help every act of giving lead to more. Because when the bottom line is a better world, no goal is too lofty. Bloomerang, built for purpose.
Welcome back. We've been talking about cultivation events. I've learned a lot. We ask all of our guests to step into the fundraising elevator with us where we're all headed up. What is that parting bit of wisdom or tip you would leave our fundraisers so that they can continue to head up?
Yeah. The one thing I would say is, fundraising is about relationships. The most successful organizations that I've seen are the ones that really take the time to invest in opportunities like cultivation events and other donor activities that allow donors to meaningfully connect with the organization in an authentic way, not a transactional way. And I just feel that in those moments, those donors are the ones that, they fall in love and they stay with you. And those are sort of, the best donors and partners to have in this work. So it's really important to invest in them.
I love that.
I love it. Well, I'm so grateful that you joined us on the show today, Amina. We are big fans of Wingo, and we have over the years followed and been fangirls of Doug and of Alex and Gwen. And so it's nice to be able to have this opportunity to collaborate with you. If folks want to learn more about Wingo and connect to you, how do they find you?
Yeah, so if you're interested in Wingo services, you can find us on www.wingo.nyc. We have services ranging from fundraising to special events like galas, digital marketing, and also we do design and rebranding services as well. So definitely check us out on our website. And I can be found on LinkedIn using my name, Amina Abdul-Majeed. And also you can always email me. My email is Aminah, AMINAH @wingo.nyc.
Amazing. I hope we've inspired some folks to invite guests in and to host some cultivation events. Thank you for joining us today, and happy fundraising to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's been lovely speaking with you. So thank you. And happy fundraising to you too.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced by Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson and Heidi Christensen. Video production by John Collier. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Hey y'all, it's Kristen. Before we leave, I want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, share it with a friend. Leave us a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.